Hey everyone! Happy Cyber Monday! Whoop whoop! Who's so excited for Cyber Monday? I am very excited. I need to do some legit online shopping. Okay, so I wanted to stop in and actually not talk about anything cyber related, seriously. I wanted to actually encourage you guys. And so yesterday I was thinking about this. Sorry, I have this hair. You know that? Okay. So yesterday I was processing these specific thoughts, and I wanted to share because I always feel like when the Lord is pressing on me with something, typically other people are going through it too, and so I want to share and encourage those who are part of my tribe. And so I was thinking about this concept of being challenged to step out of our comfort zones in order to be obedient to God. And I want to share with you guys a specific story, actually a couple stories, and give you some practical tips or part of the process of how to actually become confident, to step out of your comfort zone, to be obedient. And I think that that's something that a lot of, especially Christians, struggle with. Obviously, if it's obedience to God, you've got to be a Christian, right? Because we come to this point when, I don't know if you guys have ever been here, when you're in the grocery store line, right, and there's someone in front of you and you are feeling this overwhelming unction to pay for their groceries, right? Or you're walking into a restaurant and there's someone outside and they just seem like they're having a really hard day. Maybe they're on the phone and they're crying, and you feel this overwhelming passion to just put the hand on the shoulder and say it's going to be okay. You know, or witness to someone who's in your class. Maybe they've been in your class all semester long and they just seem like they're going through a really, really hard time, and you just feel like you need to witness and give them the grace and the hope of Jesus Christ, right? So we all come to these points in our life in all different aspects, all different scenarios, where we are so challenged to step over ourselves, out of the boat, if you want to say, and step completely into a zone that we have never been before in order to follow and be obedient to the voice of God, or what we believe is the voice of God. Because I think that's one of the biggest struggles, right? Is that we question, is this really God? Is this him talking, or is that me, or is that just me sensing this? Hi, Lisa. How are ya? Oh yeah, you can see little Mize right there. Little sleepy pug. So, I don't know if you guys have ever been there. If you've been there, give me some hearts or something. And I would love it if you would share this with someone. So if you know someone who's in that place, who's just really struggling in that tension, if you would share this with them, because I think that this could be really powerful for you guys. And so I want to share a story from yesterday, because I love stories. So I was at church, and I was visiting my parents. So I was at their church, and it was actually a church that was part of for 14 years, so I know all the people, and very familiar with a lot of people there. And so we're in service, and there's a woman on stage, and she's leading worship, and I just feel this overwhelming unction to pray for her. And so it's at the final song, and during the final song, I just see this picture in my mind for her. Is a very, very specific picture. And so we go through service, it ends. I'm getting teary-eyed, thinking, okay, is this the Lord? Does he want me to share it? Is this something that's just supposed to stay with me and I'm just supposed to pray through for her? I'm not really sure. And so typically what I do in those situations is I kind of, I'm walking around and I'm like, okay, Lord, if you want them, to get this word, you kind of make a way for it. And otherwise you're going to make me run around with a chicken with my head cut off, which is usually the case. So I'm, processing, trying to find her. I can't really find her anywhere. And I have that moment, where I'm like, God, I really just don't know if I'm supposed to be running around, to find this woman. And I don't know if I don't know. It was just that moment where you're like, I don't really feel like being a crazy person. So I have that split second thought of okay, am I supposed to go and find this woman, do everything I can to find her? Or do I just pray for her and walk away and we go home? And so I'm talking to my husband about it, and he's watched me, in the past, and we've had situations like this before, and he's like, oh, you're going to go after her and find her? And I'm like, I don't really know. I don't know if I feel like being, a crazy person. I don't know if that's weird or awkward or whatever. And he just looked at me and he was like, you've never cared before, so why do you care now? so we had this moment. I'm like, that's so true. Why do I care so much right now? And so I ended up going after her. I ended up finding her. She was actually with a friend of mine. And so we ended up talking, and it was a fantastic conversation. It was very encouraging for her. We were texting later on, and it turned out that her sister, I think it was, got the exact same picture, who was in the exact same church service. And it was just crazy, like all these confirmations. It was so faith building and encouraging for all of us. It was incredible, right? And so I was thinking about that story all throughout the day yesterday. It would not leave my mind. And I'm thinking about what my husband said, that, you've never cared, so why do you care now? And I was thinking about that moment in this history that God has built with me, right? And all these stories that I could tell of God showing up and calling me out of the boat, calling me out of my comfort zone to bless other people and to encourage other people. And I was thinking about that, and I'm like, how did I get here? How did I get to that place where I don't care, And so I don't know if you guys are there where you're like, I just really want to learn how to step out of the boat. I really want to learn how to step out of my comfort zone in order to do what God has called me to do, because I feel like most of the time fear wins. Most of the time uncertainty wins. And it's interesting because about 5 years ago, I was not this person. It's interesting because the Lord has taken me on this journey specifically in the last 5 years or so to call out of me this courageous and this confident woman who can literally step outside of myself to be vulnerable in order to say yes to God and to say yes to what He's doing. And so, sorry, this is just like raw thoughts with Laura, so if some of it is incoherent, I apologize. Plus, it's Monday after holidays. So yeah, 5 years ago, I was in this place where I actually didn't really speak up. I was very, very timid. I was very afraid of backlash from people. I was kind of like, if you think about in worship, when you're just kind of standing there in like this stagnant place, like that was a picture really of my entire life. I felt like vocally I was in bondage and physically I was in bondage, where I was so afraid to step out and give an encouraging word to someone or witness to someone or whatever it was that required of me to get over myself, to get out of my own head, to maybe put myself in an exposed place where it would invite other people to just have a response, whether it was good, bad, or neutral. And I did not have really any confidence in who I was, my voice, or just this freedom to do what God has called me to do. So it's interesting because you're probably going to think I'm a little bit crazy, but I used to go to the gym. Well, I still go to the gym really, really late at night, okay? So I'm one of those people, and Lisa knows this for sure. So I was at the gym. This was about 5 years ago. And I was just leaving the gym, and I was in the car, and I felt this overwhelming feeling like I had to go to a field that was down the street from my parents' house where I lived and dance. Crazy, right? And if you know a little bit of my story, like there's always kind of been this thread of dance, because as a kid I used to dance like crazy, and people would always be like, oh my gosh, she's such a cute little dancer, and so it was just always this point of freedom in my life where I would just dance wherever. I mean, legit, I was a little girl that was dancing everywhere, and somewhere along the way I lost that, and I kind of got this bound up, tense life. And so I'm driving home, and I'm listening to worship music, and the feeling will not leave me, where the Lord is saying, you need to go to this field and dance. Mind you, it's midnight. It's midnight. No one is around. I mean, this town is after 10 p.m. or even 7 p.m. a lot of times. It's dead. Like, no one's around. And it was a little bit chilly, and I'm like, okay, Lord, is this you? So I actually pull into my parents' driveway, and I had that moment where I'm like, okay, I can either step out and say yes to this and drive up there, or I can just go home and I can pretend like it never happened. I can pretend like I never heard it. And I said yes. So I turn the car around, I go up to this field, I park, I walk down onto this grass, and I'm listening to my music in my headphones, and I forget what song it was. I think maybe it was Forever by Carrie Job or one of those songs. And I just start dancing. And it was not anything special. It wasn't a choreographed situation. It was just me being vulnerable before the Lord and stepping completely out of my comfort zone. And even though no one was watching, even though not a single person was probably awake within a 5-mile radius, it was super vulnerable for me to do that. And so I'm thinking about that moment, that experience yesterday, and I don't know why the Lord just brought it back to my memory of like, that's why. That moment, that night was a catalyst for you to step outside of yourself when no one else was watching, because it legit has nothing to do with anyone else. It has everything to do with you and me. And I walked away from that night. I think I listened to 2 songs and then just quietly walked up to the car and drove home. Nothing crazy spiritual happened. Nothing insanely, revelatory hit me. It was just a moment of faith where I was saying yes to God when no one else could see and no one else could judge or have their say or respond. It was just me and Him working through these fears that I had of being exposed before anybody, especially God. And so that was really a catalytic moment for me in my journey of learning to combat fear and to combat possible judgment. And so I wanted to share with you guys a couple points. I think it's just 3 points. Okay, so just 3 little points that I wanted to share with you about how you can build a history with God, right? Because you think about when we're talking about a relationship with someone, usually when there's more stories to tell, you have more of a history with them, right? And so we think about that with God too, that the more stories we have of these encounters or these moments when you stepped out of the boat and seen him be faithful, that usually means that there's a greater history, there's a more in-depth history, and you know each other even more. And so I can probably share a few more stories with you guys because I'm building my history with God. And so I wanted to share with you guys a couple ways that you can build your history in order to gain this confident momentum to step out of the boat, okay? So the first thing I want to say is that God always starts in the hidden, always, at least for me. That's how He's always worked, is that He starts in these moments when no one else can watch. Because here's the reality, is that if you can't be vulnerable and real before just God, then if you're in public and you're taking that step out, it's often, I want to be careful how I say this, not rooted in the right things. And so we all have maybe either walked it out ourselves or seen it happen where you have that tension where you know that they're not really vulnerable and real before God on their own and they're in private, but yet they're so bold in how they are when they're around a lot of people. And a lot of times that's rooted in pride. It's like this self-glorifying situation where you're like, I'm not going to do this in private, but I can do this in public because other people are watching. And so in order for us to build a pure history with God, to build this confidence in Him, to build a trust in Him, He'll do it in the moments when no one else can watch because He just wants it to be you and Him. And so when you have these hidden moments, like for me, it was midnight when no one else was watching. It was pitch dark. It was a little chilly, so no one's outside. For Him to say, Laura, actually in this moment, to prepare you for what is to come, which is where you will actually be stepping into other people's stories in order to encourage them and affect their life, you need to have this moment with just you and I, because if you can't do it in this field at night, you won't be able to do it then in the right motives, because you'll always work then in a place of potential pride or false humility or self-glorification, and that's just not what I want for you. And so God is so specific to lead us through these moments that we feel are almost insignificant. I don't know if you guys have had that moment before when maybe you're, I don't even know what the examples would be, but no one else is watching and He's called you to step out of the boat. He's called you to do something that you may not have wanted to do or felt comfortable doing in the past, and you're so tempted to just toss it away and say, well, no one's here, no one's gonna know, there'll be another opportunity, and so really I can just throw it away. And I would encourage you to not do that. Don't do that. Just don't do it. Really grab hold of those moments when no one else is around. When God is calling you out of the boat, he's calling you to do something, say yes to it, because in those hidden moments, there's no pressure. There's no pressure to perform. There's no pressure to get it right or to fear criticism or judgment. It's just you and him walking out this journey, this history, this trust, and he's giving you the opportunity to do that. And so I would encourage you that God starts in the hidden moments. Okay, so that's point number one. Point number two is that watch what he does in the hidden. So for me, really analyzing that moment dancing in this field, right? This little field dancer that I am. And, I analyzed that moment to think, okay, so I had that fear of what if, when he first called me to take that specific action. There's the fear of, oh my gosh, well, what if I get out there and I make a complete fool of myself? What if no one, what if someone's like walking their dog and they all of a sudden see me and this random girl at midnight dancing in a field? Like, what are they gonna think? Or, what if I trip and I fall and, I get hurt, or, whatever. There's all these questions, right? I processed that, and then I processed how he was faithful to give me a safe space where actually no one was around. Not one person showed up. There was no one walking their dog there. I didn't get hurt. It was just this beautiful moment. Yeah, the steps were not glorious or beautiful or perfect, but there was just this little bubble of safety where I saw him be faithful. And then I walked away from that, and there was such peace that was overwhelming, where it wasn't, like I said, any of this lofty, it wasn't the spiritual insight that I gained. It was just this peace of knowing I was so faithful, and I don't know what it's going to do, but there's peace. And I know that he's going to take that, that seed of courage from me, and he's going to multiply it in the future. And so just analyze your situation that you've walked through. Analyze those hidden moments when God called you to do that one thing. And what were the fears that you faced? What were the things that you processed through that were keeping you from doing it? And then see how he was actually faithful to respond and to grab you and embrace you and help you through the situation. And so when you process through that, you'll see how he's faithful. You'll see how he literally maybe even combated those fears in order to help you work through them and help you to work through it, right? So really process those things, because he's building those specific stories to build the history with you. So you have to analyze history, right, in order to really gain the lessons and the understanding from it. And you're supposed to take those things, those lessons, those gems, those little bits of faith encouragement to be the catalyst, to be the catapult, those little stones that will push you forward into the bigger moments when other people are around. And like I said, when I was in that field, didn't know it would have any implications, any effects on my future. I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about, I'm going to be faithful to God that has called me. I'm going to learn his voice and learn when he's talking to me so that I know when he's talking in the future. And he totally showed up, and it was just a beautiful moment. Okay, so that's the second thing that you can do, is to watch what he does, watch what God does in the hidden, and analyze it. The third thing is to commit to say yes to what is right in front of you. Just commit to say yes. And no matter what it may be, if you know, here's the test, right? If you have that moment when you know that God has called you to do something, maybe it's to witness to that person, or sacrifice maybe your lunch money in order to pay for their meal, or stop on the side of the road because you know that someone is hurting, and it's you can see it's a mom with a daughter and you want to help, right? In that moment when you are questioning and you're wondering, okay, is this God? Is this God telling me to do it, or is it just me? If it aligns with his nature and his word, you are clear to go. And all after that point, it's just saying, is this something that I'm going to step out in faith and do? So meaning if it's not aligning with the nature of God, which is he's a gracious God, he is a good God, he's a loving God, he's a compassionate God, he is a fair God, and if it aligns with the principles and the concepts of the Bible. So that's so important. God's not going to call you to something that's outside of his word. He's just not going to do it. And so that's why we have to know the word, right? Because in order to know his voice, we have to know how he sounds. And that's how we find in the word, right? That's how we learn that. And so if it aligns with those two things, then you're free to go and say, okay, now it's just up to me to say if I'm going to say yes to this or if I'm going to kind of pass it along and move on in my life. And so if it aligns with those things, got that? Okay, you're good. What's interesting is that when I was, I think it was like a year ago at this point, maybe, I don't know, or no, 6 months ago maybe, I was at church and the same situation happened where I felt this overwhelming unction to encourage this one woman. She was a stranger, I didn't know her, and so I'm having that moment, where I'm like, okay, is this God or is this me? I don't want to manufacture something. I'm so careful about that, but Lord, you need to show me if this is from you. And so I'm actually walking out of the main room into the hallway, and I'm praying. I'm like, Lord, is this you? Is this you? I don't know if it's you, and I don't want to, just go and say something out of pride. I don't want to do that. And the Lord, I was so clear. He said, Laura, you know my voice. You know through our history when it's me talking. And he was so right. And in that moment, I felt this courage that I didn't have even a split second before. And I knew through this encounter what God said, that I should go and talk to this woman. And it turned out to be an incredible conversation. We were both encouraged by it, and it was fantastic. And so I think that even for you, there are these moments when you know God has called you, and you know that it's in line with him. You know that he's called you to it because you're learning his voice through the hidden moments. And now it's just you saying yes to doing it and seeing him work. And so I think that even as one of my passions is to help especially Christians who have been in it for a while, to understand and to recognize that you already hear God's voice. You already hear it. It's just being confident in it and saying yes to it and seeing how he works and seeing how he actually comes through and is so faithful to do it. It just takes you saying yes and doing it and then building that history with him. And so I would just encourage you to say yes, no matter what, to just do it. Who cares what people think? Who cares what their response would be, or if they look at you like a crazy person, or if you walk away feeling like, wow, okay, that was interesting. God is calling you to it for a specific reason, and there may not be results for a number of years, or there may be immediate results, but that's not for you to judge or to really value as far as like, oh, that's going to determine if I'm going to do it or not, is to have immediate results, immediate amazing results. It's about you being faithful to what God has called you to do. If he's calling you to encourage that person, witness that person, sacrifice in order to give them money or serve them, whatever it may look like. And so I want to end with this, is that your faith is not meant to stay in the shadows. For me, that single moment when I was called to dance in that field at midnight was not a calling for me to become a midnight field dancer. It was a moment that was supposed to implement this faith in my heart and this courage in my heart that would carry on into a sphere where I would actually impact people. And so for you, God is building these historical hidden moments with you when you would say yes, not so that you would stay there, but so that you would actually be catapulted into a place where God would take your faith and say, okay, it's time for this faith to impact other people. It's time for this faith to go impact your mother or your mother-in-law or that person at church or that homeless person. And so it's not meant to stay there. You're supposed to embrace the hidden moments, embrace the moments when no one's watching, but use those as this glorious propelling forward into a place where people would be watching and you'd be faithful. And it wouldn't be about pride. It wouldn't be about self-glorification. It would just purely be about you saying yes to God and seeing how he works. And so I hope that this encourages you. I don't know if it was a little bit rambly and all of that. I'm sorry if it was, but this is just my raw thoughts of stepping out of the boat. And it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. But I would encourage you to do it. And I have seen God be so flipping faithful to me to show me that, Laura, you can do this and you're a lot stronger than you think. And you're a lot more confident than you think. You just have to have confidence in me that I can do it and I'm going to come through for you. And so whatever that is, especially in this holiday season, If you're feeling like you're in that holiday line and you got all these toys in your hands and you don't know what to do and you feel like you need to go pray for that person, maybe you should go pray for that person, even if it costs you something. Maybe you're going to be at a soup kitchen or something and you feel like you need to give whatever's in your pockets, whatever money you have in your pockets, to that one woman in order to help her and her kids. Do it. Listen to the voice of God and just follow through and have faith that he's going to meet you outside your comfort zone when he's calling you to it. So I love you guys so much. If this encouraged you, I would always ask you to share it with a friend or maybe tag them in this post and have them have a listen. And I love you guys. I'm so appreciative of you. Final reminder, the cyber sale is now going on all day long. So whenever you buy a written package, that's my brand new Bible study all about capturing your dream, you can get 40% off everything else, any other Bible study materials, which is awesome, 40%. And there's all different Bible study materials on there. Otherwise, everything in my store is 25% off. You can grab that. And then, as always, you can sign up for the written study absolutely free to get the online access, including all the video teachings and written worship and all of that. You can do that on my website, lauradudek.com. So I love you so much, and I will talk to you guys again really soon.